Now, live from Whitney Media, 1460 WVOX, The Greenberg Report with Greenberg Town Supervisor Paul Feiner. You can join in the conversation at 914-636-0110. Now on 1460 WVOX, here's Greenberg Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Good morning, Westchester. I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenberg Town Supervisor, and we have a very interesting program today. Today we're going to be chatting with Robert Siegel, who's a lawyer, and he wrote a book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer. How anyone can find happiness? And Rob has had a very interesting, life. He was not always happy. So let's start. And Rob, could you maybe just tell us a little bit first about yourself?
Sure. Good morning, Paul. Thanks for having me on today. Just a slight correction on what you said. While I am a lawyer, I actually haven't practiced law in 26 years. I live in Westchester County in Ardsley. I'm married to my wife, Karen, who is my high school sweetheart. We went to the prom together, and we have three great kids, Pam, Molly, and George, and very active in the community. My actual occupation for the last 24 years has been as a financial advisor, and the book came about. It was actually something I thought about 8 years ago and been working on it quite a bit, and COVID provided me an opportunity to finish it. But so that's by way of background, Paul.
Could you tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote?
Sure. So the book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness, is my story. What happened was I came from, I think there was a period of time where I was, me and a lot of other people, we were, I think, more under the influence of our parents than maybe kids are today in terms of what we're going to do and what our lives were going to be, what our occupations were going to be. And there was, a particular mindset that our parents had. My parents were Depression era. Well, my dad was a Depression era person, and he was a doctor. And his point of view and my mom's point of view was that their kids should have a profession, and by profession that meant accountant, doctor, or lawyer. And I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor, and I didn't want to be an accountant. So law was was the obvious choice. Now, what happened was myself and both of my brothers, my two older brothers, we all ended up being lawyers. They wanted us all to go. They wanted to pay for law school, and it was not something I ever wanted to do. But I didn't really pay attention to that, and I just, sort of listened to what my parents wanted me to do, and I became increasingly depressed, as I was practicing law. And I had never really been depressed before in my life, maybe once for a brief period of time in college, but I had never really had a deep depression before. And it got to the point where I could no longer stand it. I couldn't take it. And so on April 11th of 1996, I went into my law office where I was working as an associate, and I took an overdose of pills and ended up in the hospital, ended up in the psych ward for a week. And the book is really, it tells the story of sort of how I got there. And then after I got there, how I adjusted what I learned. The reason, the portion I'd rather kill myself than be a lawyer is obvious, right? And it's meant to be funny, right? It's meant to be ironic and funny. The how anyone can find happiness part is basically what happened, in the 24 years after that. The book is really my biography, my autobiography, and it's about the fact that even after I quit law and I ended up in a profession that I really enjoyed, financial advising, and was good at, I was still very anxious and stressed and angry, and that manifested itself in things that I did and things that I said. And I found myself very often in situations which were embarrassing and unfortunate because I was not thinking things through. And the reason I wasn't thinking things through is I wasn't happy. Even though I was doing something I liked, I was just not a happy person. So
we have to take a break. We have to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back and we'll talk about Robert Siegel's book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness. And we'll also tell you how you can get the book. I'm Paul Fine, and we'll be back in a couple minutes.
WVOX. Now back to the Greenberg Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenberg Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
I'm the Greenberg Town Supervisor, and we have a very interesting guest, Robert Siegel, who wrote a book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness. And before we continue with the discussion of the book, could you tell us, Rob, how people could get the book?
Yes, Paul. Very easily. It's on Amazon. Just put in the title, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer. If you go to I'd Rather Kill Myself, you'll probably find it, and it's right on Amazon, and it's under $10. You can buy it both in paperback form and electronically.
Right. One of the questions I had, a follow-up to the discussion, when you overdosed, was that like an intentional overdose, or were you just like...
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, again, in the book, I talk about the fact that what happened was, it wasn't a plan. I got very depressed. I mean, and part of the book talks about depression and how when you are feeling depressed, and, in the very unfortunate circumstance where people are feeling suicidal, you're not thinking rationally. And what I say in the book is you're actually taking advice from a temporarily insane person, which is yourself. I was so depressed and despondent, I couldn't see how good my life was. And so my first couple of attempts, I was going to jump in front of a bus, but I didn't have the nerve. Because what I realized, for many years of thinking about it in therapy, was that I never really wanted to, in my life, I wanted to stop being a lawyer and didn't realize it would just probably been easier to quit. So at the point where I decided to take those pills, that was deliberate. I went up to my office. I was an associate at a law firm on Park Avenue. Early in the morning, I went in, I took the pills, and then the next thing I did was I called my mom. I called my parents. I didn't call my mom specifically, but I called my parents. And what two things that I learned from that were, number one, I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to be a lawyer. And that was, clear because I immediately called my parents for help. And the second thing I learned was I was punishing my parents. I was angry at them because I was in this situation in my mind because of them. I mean, in truth, and what the book talks about is, we have to take personal responsibility for our decisions. And yes, part of taking personal responsibility is understanding as a parent, you have to, guide your children in a way that is going to be what's best for them, not what's best for what you think is best for them, right? They've got to make their own choices. But also personal responsibility in the fact that I didn't have to do what I did. I didn't have to become a lawyer. I had free will. And so that's a long answer to your question. It was a deliberate overdose, but it was not a true suicide attempt.
And after you quit being a lawyer, have you had any instances of like depression or being upset about things, like things that had bumps in the journey of life? Have there been anything?
There's been a ton. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, yeah. So yeah. I mean, look, like anybody else, life is full of roadblocks and bumps, and I think that for me, my greatest attribute as a human being is the fact that I don't give up, that I analyze and I think and I always try to improve. And yeah, there's been tons of bumps. I mean, I went from being a lawyer making nice money to not having a job. And, I worked for my cousin who was phenomenal and gave me a job, but he didn't have a lot to pay me. And I was basically doing everything from working in a warehouse to sweeping floors to, practicing law for him. And then I went into financial advising, which when I started out, I wasn't in financial advising. I was selling insurance, which is part of financial advising. But it's a very difficult process and a very difficult business. And I was working long hours and I wasn't making a lot of money. And then I got in my own way quite a bit. And that's what a lot of the book is about. And the book, just so everybody understands, it's funny. For me, humor has always been a huge part of my life and a huge part of who I am and what I do. What I've had to learn or relearn is how to be funny, not at other people's expense, and not being insulting. So I was constantly creating bumps in the road for myself by saying stupid stuff and getting in trouble, and it impacted me. It impacted me with friends. It impacted me at work. It impacted me. Now, again, I overcame all of that. My life has ended up professionally, personally, far, far better than I ever thought it would, right? And then the part of the book, talks about the fact that you can have lots of success in lots of different areas and still not see it. And that's the biggest bump in the road of all, Paul. And I think that's the biggest bump for me. And I think that's, one thing that's come from writing the book is a number of people, lots of people have reached out to me to talk to me and tell me about their situations and talk to me about their lives and tell me about similar sort of stories, not necessarily where they were trying to take their own lives, but where they suffered from depression and anxiety, and how we don't see the good, right? We are so caught up in what we don't have. We're so caught up in the things that we don't get. We're so wrapped up in the ideas of the things that we, in our mind, want to, where we want to be, what we want to do. We're not looking at all the things we have achieved. One of the things that my mom says to me constantly is, do you never give yourself any credit? And I think one of the big problems for everybody is we don't give ourselves credit for the good we've had. So yeah, there's been bumps in the road, but those bumps have been, the book, my story is about how I overcame them. And before I give it back to you, I just want to say, I don't know how often this happens on your show, Paul, but we do have a listener in Germany right now, a friend of our family, Christina Benecke, and she's listening. So I just want to let you know you're international now.
Yeah, if she wants to call in, she could also, call in during the program and give some of her, impressions. I mean, I think this is really such a fascinating story that you have, and it also highlights that some people think success is going to law school, being a prominent lawyer, working in a top law firm, but maybe they would be happy with a job that society doesn't recognize as being as prestigious. And it's not the title; it's what you really want to do with your life that could make you happy. It's look, happiness is very different for everybody. And when I started writing the book, and I was telling people I was writing the book, and then people said, "What's the secret to happiness?" Like they were kidding around, but what I've determined is, and what my book talks about is, there is no secret to happiness. I think I hear music in the background, Paul. We have another, and we'll be right back right after this break with. And be a lawyer, how anyone can find happiness. This is a really fascinating interview, and we'll be right back.
Now, back to the Greenberg Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenberg Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
This is Paul Feiner, and I'm the Greenberg Town Supervisor, and one of my constituents, Rob Siegel, has written a book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness. And his parents told him to go to law school. He did what his parents said. He became a lawyer and actually tried killing himself because he was so depressed. He wrote a book about his experiences and now is much happier in financial, planning. And I wanted to ask, how your parents, reacted, after they learned of the suicide attempt.
Got it. Well, my parents thought they had one kid too many, so they were okay with it. All kidding aside, I'm actually my mother's favorite son. She told me that, and I hope my brothers are listening so they heard that. My parents were, again, I try to add humor to everything, Paul, so sorry about that. My parents were obviously shocked, right? Everybody rushed down to the hospital. I blacked out. They pumped my stomach. I woke up and everybody was there staring and looking at me. And I talk about in the book, my dad's reaction was, if I look back now, because look, everything is much clearer in hindsight, right? When you have time to think about it. My parents were angry. I think my dad particularly, were angry, which listening to that, you might find that to be odd, but the anger was born of fear. They were scared, right? They didn't know what was going to happen to me. They had this plan for me, and the plan had worked out really well. I'd gotten a great job and passed the bar and was making money, and then all of a sudden it all fell apart. And, just to divert for a second, a large part of the book is the fact that we can't orchestrate our kids' lives. We can only guide them. So my parents were upset, and my dad was angry, and one of the things he said, one of the first things he said to my cousin after it happened was, I guess he's not going to be the first Jewish president. And that was something he was thinking about. And now, that was a difficult thing to hear. But again, looking back at it, he was scared. He loved me. And my dad loved me. My mom, I think my mom was less culpable in this than my dad was. My mom would have been, happy with most anything we did. But, my dad was upset and he was scared. And he had a hard time expressing that. And then that's I think fear and anger, Paul, was really what they were feeling.
When you were, growing up, did your parents always push you to keep studying and just excel in everything? If you got less than an A, were they upset with you?
It's funny. I think everybody should sit down and write about themselves, whether they're writing a book that they want to publish or just, want to learn about themselves. I learned a lot about myself and my parents and our relationship over the course of writing the book. And what if you had asked me growing up if my parents pushed me, I would have said no, because I'm a motivated person. I am. I just was born that way. I'm highly motivated, and and goal driven, which has been part of the reason why I've had struggled so much in my life. Is I never see the good things. So if you had asked me if they pushed me, I would have said no. But looking back on it, yeah, subtly. They never had to push me too hard because I pushed myself. But one of the I think one of the seminal moments in my life, was when I was graduating college, and my parents came up. Yeah, my parents came up. My whole family was there, right? And my dad took the opportunity to hand me a card. Now, this may not sound like a big deal, but my dad, up until that point, in the 21 years I'd been alive, had never given me a card. My mom always took care of the cards, and they were from my mom and my dad. And he handed me this card, and I was really touched. And I opened the card, and it says, "You've come a long way." And it's a cartoon. It's a mouse pushing some elephants up a hill. And, so that's the cover. And then you open it up, and then you look inside, and there's 5 more elephants at the bottom of the hill. So the front of the card says, "You've come a long way." And then on the bottom it says, but keep on pushing. And I'm like, now you may look at that and say that's a good message. It's a smart message. But I didn't need a push. So I just looked at that and said, oh my God, really? This is the big day in my life. I'm graduating college and you're telling me I'm not working hard enough? That wasn't his intent, but that's how he was wired, right? We bought a house, my wife and I, but when we lived in Ardsley now for almost 20 years. We lived I'm sorry. We lived here, I think, it'll be 17 years, I think. When we bought our first house here, my dad walks into the house, and we were so proud. I mean, this is literally 3 years after I had tried to commit suicide, and now we're in this beautiful house. Wasn't the house I grew up in, and I grew up in Rockland County in a big Center Hall Colonial. It wasn't that, but it was a nice house. It still is a nice house. And we walk in, and my dad takes a look around. He goes, "This is all you get?" And that's just So, did they push me? Yeah, my dad did. He didn't mean to, but he did.
I was going to also ask. You have children, and do you push your kids? And sometime from your experiences, in life, has your parenting skills changed because of this experience?
Listen, what I've learned, Paul, as a dad of three, is that I may think that I'm doing everything right, and I find out all kinds of stuff that I've done wrong. Now, it doesn't mean I don't think I'm a good dad. It doesn't mean my kids don't love me and I don't have a good relationship. But one thing I've learned as a parent is you may think you've got all the answers and that you figured it out. I'm never going to do it the way my parents did it. And then you end up making your own mistakes. Now, do I think it's made me a better dad? Well, to the extent that I have calmed down a lot, and then I learned that I have a big mouth, and then I kept putting my foot in it. I've been a better dad. I'm probably been a better dad the last, listen, if you want to improve as a human being, you're going to improve, right? So, one example is I used to talk about myself all the time. When we'd be at the dinner table and I'd be telling stories, and one day my kids said, we don't want to hear about you. Right? And I realized, it's not about me. It's about my kids, and they don't want to hear about me, and I wouldn't want to hear about my parents either. And you learn. And like I said, my biggest attribute is the fact that I always trying to get better. So listen, I'm going to find out all kinds of stuff that I screwed up as a dad, and like my daughter just texted me, and I want to start to cry.
But yeah, the thing that's sort of like interesting is that so many people are looking at, think success is, getting great grades or getting into a prestigious school or getting a great job that they could show off, but that may not really be what would make them happy. And people, everybody should sort of find themselves. I wanted to also ask about your wife. You mentioned that you started dating her in high school, and so she lived through this experience with you. Your setbacks and the successes. How did she react when she found out that you were trying to kill yourself? I guess were you married at that time?
Yeah, we were. The one disappointing thing about the book is how much credit my wife is getting from everybody instead of me. Everybody, I'm kidding. But the one thing that I wasn't thinking of, I talk a lot about Karen in the book, and I talk about how she stood by me and how, you learn what love is when something like that happens, because we had no kids. She could have easily left, and most people would have, right? She was angry, which she didn't express that to me. I found that out years later in talking, right? The angry and upset and scared and hurt that I did this to her, and the hero of my story is my wife.
That's the
hero of this book is my wife. She stood by me. She never put pressure on me. She never ask me to work harder or get a different job or do anything. She just wanted me to be happy. And that's always been, her method. I learned a lot afterwards about, sort of the hurt that I caused, but she handled it like a rock star.
That's great. And you've been, you're also been, you're a coach. You've coached some sports teams. So you've given back to the community. Do you think this experience encouraged you to do more for the community at large, and that gives you a lot of happiness?
I'll give you a direct example. For probably half the time, if not more, that I lived at Ardsley, I coached a boatload of teams, and I was constantly getting into altercations. I was constantly, I was that guy, right? And I didn't see it. And after I started, working on myself and realizing all the changes that I had to make, I did give a lot back to the community. I was recognized by my community with the Jenkins Award, which is an award they give for volunteers. But after that happened, after I got that award, I was asked to serve on the board of the local the booster club for sports at the high school level, right? And I ended up being the president for the last 4 years with people who are my friends and who I am no longer pissing off, and who embrace the good that I do because I'm not always covering up with the stupid stuff that I say.
Yeah, we have to take one final break, and then we'll be back with Rob Siegel, who wrote a fascinating book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness. We'll be right back.
Now, back to the Greenberg Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenberg Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenberg Town Supervisor, and today we have a really fascinating program. My guest is Rob Siegel. Wrote a book, I'd Rather Kill Myself Than Be a Lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness. It's a book you could get on Amazon. And, for those who struggle with anxiety, depression, disappointments, this is a book that really could motivate you, because Rob turned his life around, as we reported before. He took a toxic combination of 30 pill cocktails in his law office in 1995, and it resulted in a stay in a psychiatric ward and an ability and eventually turning his life around. I wanted to ask you about your experiences in the psychiatric ward.
I had no expectation of what it would be like to be in a psychiatric ward, as I guess most people don't. But I think in the back of your mind, I guess, once I was there, I was expecting I was going to see people like me, but the people who were there were far more, had far bigger, psychological problems than I did. I was there, I went into this depression, but really I haven't suffered from depression my entire life. It's not like been an ongoing problem for me. But there were some pretty severe cases. The person who I shared a room with, ended up, he had I don't know what they're calling it now. I think they call it electroconvulsive therapy, but it's electroshock therapy, and was like catatonic. And I make jokes in the book about it because, again, I try to find humor in these situations. So in my mind, I called him Smokey, that sort of thing. And I won't get into all those jokes, it's not to make light of anyone or anyone's situation. It was how I was able to deal with it in my head that I was in the psychiatric ward. But, there was a kid there who had been cutting himself pretty severely. There was a woman who apparently had been there for like almost a year. My experience is a lot of doing nothing. There was a lot of doing nothing, a lot of sitting around and thinking. The one, I talked about that time that my dad gave me that card, and I will tell you that one of the other, major incidents in my life came out of there was I was really the one person there who was not severely psychologically damaged, where I couldn't function, and I was obviously educated. I was at NYU downtown, and they're a teaching hospital, and one of the doctors who was a teacher, a professor, asked if he could interview me in front of the class, and I guess for me, I said sure, because I love the stage, and why not? In the mental hospital, well, that's the biggest stage. So they, I sat at the bottom of the lecture center, and at the bottom, and he was interviewing me, and it was like a tiered lecture center, so there were like rows of seats that went up, and I was at the bottom, and he was, talking to me, and I noticed while I was being interviewed in the top of the lecture center that there was this male doctor and a female doctor, and they were whispering to each other and like giggling. And I don't think that they were laughing at me. I just think that they were bored, and I lost it. I started yelling at them. Not you lost it like I started throwing chairs or anything like that, but I said, how dare you? This is my effing life, and how dare you? This could be you. And the guy wasn't. He must have been my age. And that's really about probably was the lowest point of my life, where I was the sort of subject of the psychological evaluation in front of a bunch of medical students who could have been people that I went to college with. And here I am, right? And ironically enough, years later, after everything had turned around, my wife and Karen and I were at the Lyndhurst Crafts Fair, and I saw the guy, and I suppressed my urge to kick him in the nads, but I said nothing. I walked right by him, but I found that to be ironic that I saw him there. Go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to also ask, how did you overcome all these obstacles? Because was it the psychiatric ward, the doctors? Was it medication? Was it your wife's encouragement? What do you think was the reason for your success?
It's a common, like I said, Paul. Happiness is up. Everyone's happiness is different. It's a combination of things, right? Meds definitely help. I've been taking medication for quite a while. There's a huge stigma of people who take psych meds, and like I say in the book, if I had, when you're suffering from a psychological problem, people, oh, come on, smile, snap out of it, life is good, right? If I had cancer, you wouldn't come up to me and say, hey, it's just cancer, snap out of it, right? So it's a combination of things. Number one, it's medication has been very helpful. Number two, I've had therapy on and off, but I haven't been in therapy in a long time. But I've had coaches. I've had life coaches who have helped me. I have one now, Steve Harbaugh. I had another one, Steve D'Annunzio. I only work with people named Steve. And they've been hugely helpful to me, right? And so it was that. It was work on myself. It was, making the decision that I don't like feeling this way, right? The things that bothered me, the problems, the alleged problems that I had, all of these, whatever demons I had, none of them went away, right? I still worry like everybody else. Is the client going to do what I want? Is my kid going to do this or get this? But the only difference is I don't obsess over it. I learned how to realize that it's just part of life, right? Life is just a journey. Life is just a journey between birth and death, right? And it's what we make of it in between. And the problems and the issues and the stresses, none of it is ever going to go away. It's literally how we interpret it. And then that's a big part of the book is our thoughts. We become a slave to our thoughts. We become a slave to what we're thinking. We give energy to these thoughts, and that's what creates the problems. And what the biggest thing that I learned, the best thing that I learned, the thing that probably helped me the most was understanding that the things that we give energy are the things that take root. And if you give energy to your worries, that's who you're going to be, the person who worries.
Right. I mean, I think this is such a fascinating and inspiring, story that you have. And, I'm wondering, because it's so interesting, and, I think it's so, could really motivate, it's the type of story that I think a lot of people and who have problems would benefit, because people need hope sometimes, when they're down and out, and hearing a success story could motivate other people. Has your book been, reviewed or, by lots of publications? Have you had a difficult time getting the word out about your book?
I haven't really tried. I wrote the book because I wanted to write the book. My sort of end game was always that I wanted to be a public speaker and use the book as a platform for that. I haven't really yet. I only published the book at the end of the last year in October, and then there's been a lot going on. But my daughter is going to be helping me promote it and advertise it. I've sold a bunch of books, considering the fact that I haven't advertised it at all, other than mentioning it on Facebook. So if I can sell more, great. I'm making no money on the book. I invested far more money into it than I'd ever make back, and I never did it for that reason. My dream, my goal would be to be a public speaker about these things, and speak about any number of things. Speak about being a parent. Speak about being a child. Speak about motivation. Speak about business. And speak about obviously happiness, right? So
what I'm going to do is create a YouTube video, YouTube of this interview, and I'll circulate it, so hopefully more people will read the book and be inspired by by the book. If you mentioned you want to speak about your experiences, if people would want to invite you to meetings or speaking opportunities, how could they reach out to you?
They can go to robsiegel.com, which is my website.
And it's ROB.
Email me. ROBSEGALL. They can email me, robsiegel@robsiegel.com. And again, it's SEGALL. I have a Facebook page that's called Rob Siegel, and let me see if there's any other way. No, I mean, really, through the website or to email me directly, robsiegel@robsiegel.com is probably the best way, or to go through the website, and there's an email address on that as well. And if you want to buy the book, again, it's on Amazon. I'd rather kill myself than be a lawyer, How Anyone Can Find Happiness, and it's $9.95, I think.
Right, and you, in addition to being a local volunteer in Ardsley and the winner of a prestigious award for your community service, you're also an amateur musician, and you enjoy softball as well. So you have found
that is true. I enjoy softball. Softball doesn't enjoy me that much anymore, but I am in a band locally, Band Art, which has been around Ardsley and Westchester in the city for 14 years. Again, that's part of the book. You got to do the things in life that you're passionate about. We've raised tens of thousands of dollars for a bunch of local charities, and we've been pretty popular in Ardsley. So.
The program's over now, but I just want to thank you. And again, if people want to buy the book, I'd rather kill myself than be a lawyer, by Rob Siegel, Segall. You could get the book on Amazon, and Rob Siegel's website is www.robsiegel.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Paul.
Great, and good luck, and thank you for what you've done for the community.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Okay, great.